I hope everyone is enjoying their summer so far. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen with you. Alrighty, so today we're going to be talking about two different technology tools that I like to use in my classroom. And I'm hoping that you'll be able to integrate them in your classroom instruction as well after today. So first, I'm just going to give you a brief introduction about Flipgrid. So what is it and how you can use it in your classroom? Flipgrid is a video recording platform. So students can log on and view a teacher prompt and then record their responses in a private setting. So students can get on and view each other's, but it is private, so not just anyone can log on. So if you have students with privacy concerns or who don't have like their picture photo release, this is still a good option. And then in addition to students being able to view each other's, teachers can also offer feedback on this platform. So just in case you've never set up a Flipgrid account before, or maybe you forget how to access yours, if you were to just type in the Google search flipgrid.com, this is what's going to come up. You can go to either the educator sign up, or you can create, or you can log into your account if you already have one. So the first thing it's going to prompt you to do when you open Flipgrid is to create a discussion group. So the discussion group is basically where students will go and where they'll be able to see each other's responses. So depending on your class, you can decide how you'd like to name it. I typically just name my group based on the given year. But if you teach multiple different grades or grade levels or different sections within a grade, and you'd prefer just the individual classes to be able to see each other, then you could label them that way as well. But basically you would create your group based on what students would be in it, and then who can view each other's responses. And as I'm going about, if you have any questions, feel free to just interrupt me or type them in the chat bar if anything is confusing. So after you create your class, it's going to prompt you to either enter an email domain or to add your students. So typically what I do is just type in what our Gmail domain is. So for us, it's @waynedale.us. But that's still a Gmail account, so it makes it pretty easy for students to later sign in. Or you can just add your students if you have Google Classroom set up, or you can add them manually by entering a username for each. So you add your students or an email domain so they can add themselves, and then you'll be able to have a link that you can share with students so they can access it. I would recommend, however, before you go ahead and share the link with them, you may as well create a topic for them to respond to. That way they have some purpose for getting on the website. So I'll show you how to assign a topic, which is what students would be responding to. So you would go to your educator dashboard, and I'll show you this in real time in a second. But basically, you can go into your dashboard, which is where you created your class group. You can change the cover page to make it match so your students can find it more easily, but you will find the create a topic button. And when you do that, that's where you can title it and give any sort of directions you want for your students to follow when they go to actually record their response. So you can give any directions in this box. And then what I like about Flipgrid is that you can add a lot of different visuals to go with it. So you could even record your directions for primary students. If we're still struggling readers, you could actually just give verbal directions there. You could put a picture to go with it just to add engagement, or you can even do like a YouTube video. Sometimes I'll use that if students are responding to a story. I can actually link a read aloud there. So after you go ahead and set up the question, then you can add any special specifications. So this function that says topic moderation, basically that just says that you have to view the responses before they're actually posted for students to see. So if you have any concerns about maybe students recording appropriate responses, that might be a good function to turn on. You can specify how long they have to record. I typically cap it around 90 seconds. That seems to be long enough for most things that I use, but you can kind of decide based on the assignment. You can turn on the ability to give feedback to each other, and they can do that through video or typing in comments. And then there's also an option for closed captioning. But I'll show you this in live time so you can kind of see what it looks like. Maybe. All right, there it goes. So if you go to your educator dashboard, this is what it's going to look like. This is where all of my previous topics would be. You can go over to the side to create your topic. And that's what I was just describing. So you type your title in. This is where you can add any of the extras. So if you were to click like the recorded video, it would come up so that you can actually record directions in live time if you're comfortable with that. Or you can add like a video link, lots of options there. So at the end, you would create your topic and it's going to automatically prompt you to share it. I'll show you what that looks like with one of the old ones that I've made. And you can always go back and reshare things if you want students to comment on them. So that's the share link. You can just go ahead and copy and paste it into Google Classroom, or students can log on to flipgrid.com and type in a code. And the code is also on each of the discussion boards for reference. So the code would be right there. So if you'd rather just write that on the board and have students go to Flipgrid, that's an option as well. One of the nice features about the educator dashboard is it does allow you to view it as a student. That's been really helpful for me because I think one of the hardest parts of incorporating new technology is trying to navigate it from the student perspective when you're only used to really seeing the educator side of it. So I'll kind of show you what it looks like from the student perspective. When they click on the link that you share with them, after you create a topic, it's going to look like this. They can go ahead and click join with Google. At least in our school system, everything is linked to their Google account. So they'll log into the Chromebook and their login already has their Google account logged into. So if they click join with Google, there's nothing else they have to type in, which makes it really easy for primary students. And then this is what their dashboard looks like. So they'll click the pink recording button when they're ready to respond to the prompt that you gave them. Any sort of video or picture is going to be up above. And then all of the peer responses will come up in a grid form down here. So this is what it's going to look like when they get ready to record. So students will click on that pink recording button. It's really nice because it counts down for them. So it gives them a 3, 2, 1 so they can get ready. And then as they're recording, this is what the screen's going to look like. But they can pause at any time. They can click the X to retake. And then when they pause and are ready to move on, they'll hit the green next button. So you could even show this. I'll share my presentation at the end with everyone in the group. If you'd like to display this as you introduce Flipgrid to your students, if you haven't yet, it might be a good option so they can kind of see what it looks like. That way you don't have to conference with students at each step of the phase as they're recording. After they click that next button, it's going to take them to the video replay. And so that's where students can rewatch what they've already recorded. And then when they're ready, they can hit next. The last step would be to change the cover picture that's posted. So you'll notice there's this like camera that says take a selfie. So students, if they prefer to change their picture, they can do that. And I usually let them make like silly faces or add like emoji stickers and things like that. So they seem to like that function that's available. I do believe there's also an option on your educator dashboard to turn that off. So if it becomes more of a distraction with all the special effects, then you can always turn that function off. So after students record, it will post to the classroom page. But I wanted to give you some ideas for when they are recording, just to kind of share my experience, some things that have worked and some things that I plan to try in the future. So I think one of the most important things would be to teach students expectations before recording. And this is something I kind of learned earlier that's helpful to do ahead of time. So I'll share these with you at the end of the presentation as well, but I found a few different variations of posters that you could share with students either before recording or that you could put around the room or even like in their recording areas, which I'll talk about more. But one of the things that I try to remind students before they record their videos is to speak loudly and clearly, and also to find a quiet spot to record. I know a lot of times, especially my young kids, get nervous about recording or embarrassed, so they talk really quiet in a mousy voice. So it's a good reminder for them to speak into the camera. We also remind them to put their device on a flat surface so it doesn't look like we're watching a roller coaster ride when we view their videos. We remind them to look at the camera when they're talking and try not to read off the paper. So if they use any sort of planning guide, I know for my first graders, it tends to be a bit of a struggle to read right off their paper and it comes off pretty choppy. So sometimes it's almost just better to not let them use it, to just kind of talk from memory. I remind them to make sure their face is in the screen. Sometimes we'll get students who record themselves and they put their Chromebook on the floor, but then I only get like here down of them. So I remind them that I want to see their lovely face in the camera screen. And then this is a different set of posters, but I wanted to just include both. You'll notice some duplicates, but if you wanted to print these and use them in your classroom, I wanted to have them as a resource available to you. So this just prompts them to turn on the camera access and the microphone access. So that can be confusing at first for students, but usually after they've done it once, they can do it independently. So just a prompt to do that. This is a reminder to check the volume before recording. They can press that pink button when they're ready to talk. Again, to keep their device steady, to speak slowly and clearly into the microphone, to use a consistent volume when speaking. That's something I've noticed with Flipgrid. I'm not sure why, but I don't know if it's because students are nervous at the beginning and then they get a little more confident and start shouting into the camera, but to talk at the same volume. And you could always model some examples and non-examples of this for students. Reminding them to look into the camera, using an inside voice, trying to stick to the script. I know some of my students have future aspirations of being YouTubers, so they like to tell all of their classmates to subscribe to their videos and like their videos at the end. So sometimes we do need reminders just to stay on task. Speaking with energy and expression would be good to model for them ahead of time. Sometimes they tend to cut their videos off before they're done talking, so you could use this just to remind them to maybe count to 3 before pressing the pause button. And then as they are finished, to listen closely to the finished recording, just to double check their work and make sure they answered the question. And then you can always remind them that they're allowed to try it again and to wear their headphones when they are listening to that playback recording. That's something I learned that I definitely should have prefaced, because you have a bunch of kids trying to record at the same time and then their old recordings are playing and there's a lot of background noise. So hopefully that would help eliminate some of that. So again, I'll share those posters with you, but those are just some thoughts that I have found that are helpful when using Flipgrid. Something else I want to try is having designated areas for recording. So in the picture on the left, you'll notice there's like one of those push lights. And I thought that might be a good visual cue for students. I know a lot of times students are excited about watching each other's videos. So if they've already finished, they're trying to talk to other classmates in the classroom. But this would be a good visual cue to show like, I'm recording, please don't interrupt me. So that students aren't interrupted quite as frequently when they're recording. And then in both of these two pictures, they're actually using like soundproofing foam, which you can buy on Amazon. I have not been that intense about my setup, but if it's an option that you use all the time, it could be worth it for you. I was planning on trying out something like the third picture. I was actually thinking about repurposing the cardboard dividers that our district purchased for COVID purposes. But since we're hopefully not going to be using those next year, I was thinking about turning those into like little recording studios to have maybe like 3 or 4 in the classroom for when students do go to record their responses. I think that privacy will just help give them a little bit more confidence. I know they do get nervous when they go to record. And then also having those posters just as visual prompts as the recording might be helpful. And then the last picture I found, it looks like another teacher just tried to use like those cloth cubbies that you would put in cubby shelves. So another kind of easy example, but hopefully would help with some of the background noise and students being able to focus when they're recording. Something else to keep in mind, depending on your student population, maybe having them write an idea of what they're going to say to keep them on topic. But like I said, it just kind of depends on your population of students. And then sometimes I will set a number of do-overs allowed, because you'll get the perfectionist students who just want to record over and over. So that might be an expectation to set ahead of time. Alrighty, so these are some of the ways that I have implemented Flipgrid in my classroom. And feel free, again, to pause me if you have questions as I go. But one of the things that I've tried before is using Flipgrid for beginning of the year introductions. So I tried that last year when we weren't able to have our Meet the Teacher Night in person. So I sent home a QR code link on my introduction parent letter, and then that link should have taken them to Flipgrid. And so I had just prompted them to introduce themselves, tell me about the best part of their summer, and then something they're looking forward to about the school year. I have to say I didn't have the best turnout or response with that, but it could be just part of the year that it was, or the young age. So maybe if you have older students who maybe have their own technology or cell phones, that could be a good option to introduce themselves at the beginning of the year. One of my favorite ways that I use Flipgrid is to respond to text in the classroom. So after maybe like a read aloud or a mini lesson, I'll have students get onto Flipgrid to record themselves answering some sort of question. For example, when we were working on comparing and contrasting, we read 2 different texts that compared and contrast life long ago from life today. And I do have my students usually reference something. So we had like an anchor chart that had compare and contrast vocabulary. So they were asked to use words like however, on the other hand, likewise, and incorporate those that type of language in their response when they compared and contrasted. So you can use things like that as they go to record, or you could ask them to identify a problem and solution in a story, retell key details, lots of options with that. So that's one of my favorite ways to use it, and it's a good assessment tool also. And those videos will always be there, so you can always go back and reference them. Another idea is to have students present their projects on Flipgrid. So we've done a couple of different things like animal projects where they made dioramas of their animal habitats, or they made their own math board games. If you don't have enough classroom time for all 24 of your students, or however many you have to present in the classroom, this can still be a good option for them to share their learning with peers without taking quite as much class time. So they can share whatever project they've been working on, and they can still respond to each other on the Flipgrid platform. Another idea would be to use Flipgrid to present students' written work. So for example, if they wrote like a personal narrative, they could read it back on Flipgrid. And it's good practice for them to reread their work, and also for them to share, kind of get the idea of like publishing their work. Or maybe if you're writing about an informational text and you want students to be able to learn from other students' responses, that could be a good option. Another idea that I've looked into, I actually haven't tried this in my own classroom yet, but I saw the idea and I liked it, so I'm hoping to try it next year, is to do either like math talks or book talks on Flipgrid. And so what that would look like for math, you could give students either all the same problem or even differentiate and give them different problems. And the goal would be for them to describe the problem in their recording and then also how they solved it. So they could talk about strategies they used and maybe even model a think aloud for how they solved it. I know with our math curriculum, that's a big push, is to be able to explain their thinking, but it also like causes a lot of frustration with my students because the written expression isn't quite there in first grade to fully explain what they're thinking. So this kind of takes the frustration out, but still allows them to share their thinking with peers. So again, you could use that as an assessment tool. And then the book talks, I was thinking maybe more with older students, but as they're reading chapter books, they could give book reviews on Flipgrid and either recommend books or talk about their favorite parts of books for reference for their peers to go back through and get ideas for future reading interests. So that was just a thought that I had with that. I have used Flipgrid to practice vocabulary, but I'm hoping to use it maybe at a vocabulary center towards the end of the week next year. So I was thinking that students can either act out or give clues about words that you've been practicing for the week. So let's say you have a set of 5 or 6 words that you've been working on. Students could either give synonyms or antonyms or even act out the word, and then they could have their peers guess. So the feedback feature is really nice for that one because it allows them to actually guess, and then the original recorder can respond and say if they were correct or not. And then another idea for using Flipgrid could be for fluency practice. I was thinking about trying to do that more next year as well. So if you're practicing a poem or maybe a decodable text for the week, by the end of the week after students have practiced it, they could read it out loud for extra fluency practice and record themselves. And then that's a good example of them to have to go back and self-reflect on their own fluency. Any questions about any of those?
So far, the chat is quiet.
All right. All right, I would like to give you just a few examples of what it has looked like in my own classroom. Let's see here. So the first example I'm going to show you, it was actually from at-home learning, but it does have to do with acting out or describing weekly vocabulary. So go ahead and share that.
Hello, everybody. I want you to solve 2 clues from this week. I am beep that the movie is coming out this week. And beep that this is a panda. Hope you guys like my video.
So that is an example of a student describing the vocabulary word thrilled. So he was thrilled that the movie was coming out this week. And I had it censored for privacy purposes, but he had a giant panda bear in the back of his room at home. So he was thrilled that he has this giant panda bear. So there's an example of what it would look like if a student were to respond with that vocabulary prompt. The next video is in response to the read aloud Spookily the Square Pumpkin. And students' questions were differentiated for this one. So it allowed me to ask some higher level thinking questions to students who needed to think a little bit deeper, maybe make inferences. And then there were just some students that answered questions that could have been found in the text. So here's an example of one of those responses.
Hi guys, I'm going to describe this question and I'm going to read it today. So here we go. Describe how Spookily saves the day. Because Spookily was a square and the other pumpkins were circles. And also the square pumpkin saved the day because he was a square and there was a hole in the thingy. I really don't know how it goes, but it's a thingy. But he really saved the day, and pumpkins just bumped to Spookily because he was saving the day and not anymore because. And at the end. So some pumpkins were growing in different shapes and different colors. Because some pumpkins were just in different colors in one pumpkin. I hope how you learn has Flipgrid saved that day. Bye guys.
So that's a good example of a real life classroom setting. So this is why I do think the recording centers would be nice. You can definitely hear some background noise in that, but you can also still hear him, so it still serves the purpose. So just to kind of give you an idea. And this is also a good example of how you can use Flipgrid as an assessment tool. You notice in that video that he was trying to think of the word. What's that word? The thingy. And he was describing the fence, how the pumpkins didn't fall through the fence because Spookly saved the day. So it just gives you some really good feedback and a look into your students' thinking that you maybe wouldn't have noticed had you just had a whole group classroom discussion. So I do really like that feature of it. And then the last video I wanted to share with you, we used Flipgrid in science and social studies when we were working on a producers and consumers project. So students were asked to produce a product and advertise it to consumers. So I'll show you an example of that as well.
Hey, what's up, everyone? Have you ever wanted a Darth Vader robot? Then you're gonna want this. It's called the Darth Vader robot, and it plays games with you. It will play lightsabers with you. If you get it, chop, and it turns right back into it. And guess what? It's on sale at Target, Walmart, and Rose. And if you want it, you better come and get it. It's on sale for $99.76. And that is my commercial. You might want to get one of those. Yeah.
So you might want to get one of those. In our defense, we hadn't taught money yet. So the $99.76 gave me a good chuckle. So anyway, those are just some examples of how you could use Flipgrid in your classroom.
Bethany, we do have a question in the chat.
Yeah.
Is there an option for kids to only share with the teacher instead of the entire class? I can imagine some kids being shy about everyone seeing their videos.
That is a good question. I do believe because you can turn off like the feedback feature, I bet that there is.
There is. It is called moderate.
Yes. Yep.
And if you turn that on, the teacher does have to approve the video to be released. So if you, so if there's a student that does not want their videos released, you just never say, you have to switch it to active, I think.
Yes.
So.
Yep. That is true. I did look into that. Thank you. So just to kind of wrap up of why I enjoy using Flipgrid in the classroom or how it could benefit your classroom instruction. It makes it really easy to differentiate instruction. So you can always give your students varying questions or prompts to respond to, and that allows them to not even really know that it's being differentiated. They just know that everyone has something a little different to answer. It's a good formative assessment tool. So I've used it to even take reading grades before, just to see if students can retell 3 key details in a text, or if they can identify a problem and solution. And it is really engaging for students, especially being able to watch each other's videos is the biggest thing that they really enjoy. So it's just a good formative assessment tool that is more interesting for them. And then you can also use it really with any subject area. So you can use it to fit your specific needs in the classroom. Before I move on from Flipgrid, I just wanted to let you know that I do want to share some resources with you. So if you wanted to share an email in the chat with me, I'll try to make sure I get these resources to you. But I had showed you the Flipgrid rules and expectations posters. If you wanted to make your own little recording area, you could use those. I do have a student recording checklist. So if you'd like to give that to students before they start recording, so they can get an idea of your expectations. You could use something like this or edit it to meet your needs, but this just says that they included a closing, they spoke in complete sentences, they explained their thinking by using the word because, and then also that they were speaking clearly, answering the question, and we could see them on camera. So I'll share that with you. I also have a resource that explains how to use Flipgrid at home. So if you do decide to use Flipgrid as a homework assignment, like you feel like you have a group of students who does have access to technology, you could try that. Or if you wanted to try the at-home introductions at the beginning of the year, this might be helpful to send home. And then along with that, if you were going to do the beginning of the year introductions, here's like a prompting sheet that I'll share with you that kind of helps them use sentence starters to talk about their summer. They can write down their ideas to speak on their recording, and then it gives them prompts to respond to each other. So that's an option if you'd like to try it. And then the last thing that I wanted to share with you is a Flipgrid review activity. So this just is a good prompt, maybe an end of the year project where it talks about giving them an assignment that they could explain something that they've learned this year using Flipgrid. And you can always adapt that to meet your specific classroom needs, but just some resources I'd like to share. So thank you for attending. All right, any other questions about Flipgrid before we move on? Alrighty, in that case, I'm going to switch over to talking about boom cards. And today I'm going to be focusing on the 100% free version of boom cards. If you're anything like me, I always end up spending more money on my classroom than I'd like to. So when I can use free resources, I am all about it. So what are they and how can I use them in case you haven't heard about or used boom cards before? Excuse me. They're an interactive digital tool, so you can use them with iPads, tablets, or computers. And there are decks created to review skills. So decks are kind of just like online flashcards to help students practice specific skills. You can access boom cards through a free account and search through their free resources. And you can also access them through Teachers Pay Teachers downloads. So I'll show you how to do that as well. So in order to access boom cards, you would need to create a free account if you haven't already, or log into your already existing account. To search for resources that you want to use in your classroom, you would go to the store tab. So there's a little shopping cart there. And then when you're in this store tab, you can use the sort by function to find the free resources. So when you click the sort by, if you click the drop down menu, there's one that says price low to high. So anything that has 0 points would be the free resources to use. So look for the 0 points. After you find a deck that you'd like to use, if you just click on it, there's a drop-down menu that will allow you to save it to your library. If you find resources from Teachers Pay Teachers as you're browsing for ideas in your classroom and you'd like to try one of those, if you download the Teachers Pay Teachers PDF and then click on the link provided from there, it should automatically go to your library. So it'll prompt you to log into your Boom Learning account. And then if you go to your library, it should be there. So if you do find resources from Teachers Pay Teachers, that would be how to get them. So after you save something to your library, there is a drop-down menu. If you go to the Action tab next to your deck that you selected, the drop-down menu will give you some choices. So if you're using the completely free version, you're going to want to select the one that says Fast Pen. This is what students will use that doesn't require them to log in at all. So it's not going to save any of their data. I believe like for the first 2 weeks, when you first sign up for boom cards, it's free. And you can have them use a different function to actually log in and it'll save their data, but that will expire. So I think it's easiest to just go ahead and teach you how to use the completely free version. That way you'll be able to use it more long-term. So when you select the Fast Pen option and click the Generate Pen, it's going to give you a link. And the last 4 either letters or digits are going to give you the code. So that code does expire in 2 weeks. but you can always just refresh and get a new link. So I always just copy and paste the link directly into Google Classroom so that students can then click on it to access the deck, and it'll open individually for each of them on their Chromebooks. Some reasons to implement boom cards that I have found helpful. One of my favorite parts is that it's completely paperless practice. So instead of having to copy worksheets, which students don't always enjoy anyway, it's good practice for them, but they can still use a digital tool. I appreciate that a lot of the decks have audio directions. So especially for your struggling readers, or if you need to differentiate, a lot of times it'll give them directions, or it'll have an audio feature to help them differentiate sounds. So for example, if you're practicing digraphs, sometimes it'll read the word out loud and they have to decide which digraph is being used. So I do like that audio function available. It is an option to differentiate learning with boom cards. It's a little trickier with the free version, but definitely still doable. So if you're looking to differentiate, for example, if you have a student still practicing letters and sounds, while the rest of your class is learning like Bossy R, you can assign, you can look for a deck that practices letters and sounds and just assign it individually to one student on Google Classroom. So when they go to log in onto boom cards, their boom card deck is going to look a little bit different. So you can just differentiate by assigning different decks to different students using Google Classroom. I do like that boom cards give students immediate feedback. So as soon as they answer, it's going to give them either like a little ding or a whoops, and they have to answer correctly before they can move on. There is a skip function, but that would automatically count that question. It's just a tool.
Bethany, I'm not sure. I think you're muted, but I think.
So hopefully we can pick up where we left off. I was just talking about how boom cards can be a good assessment tool. You just have to be careful whether or not your data is valid, because students can just guess until they get it correctly. Another idea for using boom cards is that they can be completed at school or home. So it's not one of those websites where you have to be on a school browser to use, which is kind of nice. So if you have a parent who's asking for extra practice at home, this could be a good option. You could just assign them some extra decks specifically to that one student on Google Classroom for some extra practice at home. And then you can also use boom cards for whole group practice on the smartboard, and I'll kind of show you an example of what that might look like. So I will show you in live time some ideas for boom cards. You can make separate folders over here to organize any of the decks that you decide to save. So I'll show you a few examples of decks that I have found and used. When you click on a deck, it's going to take you into the preview mode. So it might only show you 4 or 5 of the maybe 20 cards in the deck, but it gives you an idea of what your students will be doing. So this is an example of one that has the audio function with it. Shirt. So a teacher who has made this boom card deck is reading the word that goes with the picture, and then they would have to select the answer that goes with it. Cheese. One of the reasons I like this function is that it does cause students to kind of slow down and think. If they just look at the picture, they might think chair, but if they listen,
Throne.
then they have to think a little bit on adjusting their mindset. So that's an example of a boom card deck. I'll show you some other options of decks out there. You can do a lot of different things with them. So it gives you some flexibility. This is an example of one where you're practicing comprehension. So this would allow students to either listen to it or read the text to themselves. So it kind of automatically differentiates. If students are capable of reading, then they'll most likely probably want to read it themselves, or they can click on the audio function to answer. So again, it is multiple choice, but there's a few different options within comprehension passages. So I can show you some other examples. This might be one that you would practice whole group. And the reason I say that is because it does ask you to just type in the boxes. So there's really no right or wrong answer. It would just submit your answers, but it doesn't necessarily grade them. So this one was talking about idioms. So they would have to read the passage. So you can do this in a whole group setting or have a student read it out loud for the class, and then focus on what clues would help us understand the meaning of the underlying idiom. So that would be an example of a deck that you might want to use in a whole group setting. Okay. One of the decks that I like are the ones that do allow you to type in. This takes the guessing out of it a little bit more. So for example, if you're practicing 3-digit addition, if students just added 2 of the numbers to get 10, it's going to have them continue trying until they do get the correct answer. So that's a little bit more helpful if you're trying to take out the guessing as much as students are practicing. And then one of the other decks I wanted to show you is just kind of a fun idea. So this one, as they answer questions correctly, it uncovers a mystery picture. So that makes it a little bit more engaging for students. And then it slowly uncovers the mystery picture. So that's an example of that. And then when you are looking for just specific skills, again, you'd go to the store. You could type in the search bar, maybe you're looking for multiplication practice. So if you search that, and then your drop-down menu, change your price low to high. And then these would all be examples of free resources. So these are all the 0-point ones. As long as you're practicing skills that are pretty common, you can usually find free decks with quite a few different options. So you're welcome to kind of explore that and see what you would need. When you click on the deck, it'll take you to this screen, and you can click on it again to preview it, or you can just add it directly to your library. So yeah, any questions on anything related to boom cards so far?
The chat is clear.
Alrighty. The last thing I wanted to talk about then in relation to boom cards is actually how to make your own deck. This is something a little bit newer to me, but I've been playing with it a little bit, and it's really not too hard to navigate. So you're going to go to the Studio tab if you'd like to create your own deck. So let's say you're searching for a skill and you can't find anything that's free. It's going to prompt you to make your own pen name. And that's basically if you decide to sell your decks in their store, they want you to have a pen name to do that. I'm assuming you probably need to have a paid version to sell your decks, but you can still make them to use. So when you click on new decks, it's going to come up with this option so you can create your own. And then anything that you've already created will also be here as well. So I started making my own yesterday, and then I just published it privately. So no one else can access it, but I can use it to share with students. So if I were to open that, you can get a feel for what it would look like if you were creating your own deck. So this is the platform that you would create on, and it looks a lot like Google Slides or PowerPoint. The top card is called the template card. So anything that you edit on here is going to come up in all of the future slides. You can edit those slides then individually, but if you want them to be on all the slides, you would edit the template card. So you can add images, videos, voiceover, and sound. So I just made an example deck based on the story We're All Wonders. So first I tried making a multiple choice question. So to do that, I just clicked here and dragged it over. And then you would click to decide which one is the correct answer choice, and you can pick which one you want it to be. So when I was on that, I can go over to the tab over here and mark it as wrong or correct. As you're creating each of these problems, you can just type in to double click to type in your answers, and then you can always preview them to see what it would look like in live time. So what is the main character's name in the story? If I would have said August, incorrect, Augie, it's going to give you that ding. So you can double check what that looks like as you go. And then if you close out of the preview, it'll still just automatically save your work. I tried a different function on this page. I used the multiple pictures. So I clicked and dragged that over. When I double clicked on the image, then I could just insert an image that was saved to my desktop. So I actually just took screenshots from a read aloud of We're All Wonders, and then put them in as answer choices. So I like this idea for my visual learners and also for my struggling readers. It helps differentiate, but they can still show me that they know how to sequence. So I like that option. I tried a fill in the blank option. So this one, I just inserted a text box. So you would click and drag here, and then I inserted a fill in the blank. Then with fill in the blank, you can double click. This is one of the correct answers, but you can add multiple correct answers. So if I were to preview this, I would have to type in exactly how it's spelled. So I could say Augie's mom says that he is special. That would be true, but because I didn't enter it exactly like that, it's not going to count it as correct. So if you wanted students to have an exact answer, they could go back to the text to reference it. But that just kind of gives you an idea of what multiple or what fill in the blank looks like. And the last function I tried as I was creating my own deck was the caption picture. So you can add an image here again by just saving something as a JPEG onto your desktop, adding a caption to go with it, and then a response box. So this could just be a fill in the blank, and you could just mark that your answers vary so students don't automatically get it wrong if they don't type the exact answer in. As you scroll down through this example deck, you'll notice this is like the studio template. So it gives you tips of how to create it. So when you go to create your first one, it will give you the same thing. So I had just deleted out these text boxes and changed it to my work. But it's going to give you ideas of like you can have multiple correct answers. It'll tell you how to do like click and drag. You can add buttons and audio. So this might be something you just want to mess with a little bit to kind of figure out how to make your own deck, but those are the basic tools. If I'm being honest, I didn't feel like this platform was super user-friendly. It's definitely manageable, but I felt like it was pretty time-consuming. So just kind of keep that in mind if you do go to create your own deck. I personally prefer the pre-made ones that are already free. But if there's a skill you really wanted to use Boom Decks for, but you couldn't find it in the free version, this could be an option. So that's mostly what I had for you. I did want to save everyone just a few minutes if you wanted to log on to either Flipgrid or Boom Cards yourself and play with some of these things a little bit. You could search for resources that you might use in your classroom and save those to your library on Boom Cards. Or if you wanted to mess with Flipgrid a little bit and you had questions as you go. I figured I'd just stay on for a little bit in case anyone did that and had questions. But that's all I have for you today.
And feel free to unmute your mic or type in the chat.